Briahna Joy Gray made an announcement recently on X that should have everyone concerned. When we talk about free speech on the show, we are talking about protecting your right to say what you want to say when you want to say it, whether we agree with it or not. And before we get into the announcement that Briahna Joy Gray just made, I do want to go back to a time more recently when there was a whistleblower who spoke out against what the editorial decisions were made at the BBC. Let's go ahead and take you back to that moment because I feel this is very important at this point in time. This was the whistleblower talking about the editorial decisions at the BBC during the time about the genocide in Gaza. Listen to this.
Israel has a right to defend itself. That was the editorial line that was drilled into us, into all of our coverage. It was really an integral part of the editorial stance. To a guest talking about, Israeli airstrikes killing Palestinians in Gaza, that would be the response from our presenters.
Denying access to food is collective punishment, and that we should all be clear in saying that.
Israel will argue, obviously, that it has a right to defend itself.
People were terrified of using the word genocide in coverage. They still are. You will very rarely see it in any BBC coverage. And if an interviewee says the word genocide...
This is a genocide happening in front of our eyes.
That word is, as you know, incredibly emotive, and the Israelis, as you know, will be saying that they are targeting Hamas only.
The presenter will almost always panic.
The Labour Party, of all political parties, which has always had a strong peace contingent within it, is now actually supporting genocide.
Okay, maybe just avoid that language if that's okay.
Why is this important when we're talking about what just happened to Briahna Joy Gray? We know that Bree has gone through censorship herself from her time at The Hill Rising. We'll get into that a little bit later. But this is a warning to everyone. This act of censorship does not just apply to journalists. Obviously, they are in a position where they're supposed to report the news. But if you do have the producers telling you what you're allowed to say and what you're not allowed to say, then ultimately we are not really getting the real news. We are getting the narrative that they want you to believe. This is why I'm heavily critical of corporate media. But it's not just corporate media. We have seen this go to levels that I would say have been unprecedented. If you look at the UK, for example, they have taken extreme measures to shut down people who are critical of Israel, whether it's censoring them or arresting them. That's how far it has gone now in the UK. I've been warning people about social media. The reason why you continue to hear politicians complain about social media, complain about X, is because they really want to target that area as well. One of the platforms that has been successful in targeting pro-Palestinian voices has been Meta. Meta is comprised of Facebook and Instagram. This is owned by Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg, who from what I understand is also very much pro-Israel. It was just a year or two ago that Mark Zuckerberg admitted to podcaster Joe Rogan that he was told to suppress the Hunter Biden laptop story. So Mark Zuckerberg, is known for doing this before. And I would argue even to this day, Facebook is probably one of the places that is the most censored from my experience. But now that brings us to Instagram, because apparently now Briahna Joy Gray has just announced that she has been suspended on Instagram. And I'll give you a second to guess what you think that suspension is over. She made the announcement here on X. Instagram suspended me. Zionists have been spamming my Instagram all day. I added the story below a post about a Zionist running over the praying Palestinian to my stories, and they subsequently suspended my account. I've included some examples of what Zionists have been leaving in my inbox. So first and foremost, I don't spend a lot of time on Instagram. I'm there like for the documentary purposes. My editor, Scott, we've been tagging each other on things, and he said push some of these things out on Instagram for the documentary. But for the most part, I don't spend a lot of time on Instagram. Don't know why. It was just never really my favorite app of choice. However, a lot of people do spend time on Instagram. And I want to show you what this post said that she was referring to. It's this post. And I don't know if everybody saw this or heard about this. It's been over 5 days since her speech, and only one German outlet reported that Anna Ledke, a German journalist, was sexually assaulted by Israeli forces. So this story came out, and he's showing the different outlets that reported it. Anna is one of the activists that was aboard the Freedom Flotilla and was imprisoned with them. And she has come forward with a story telling people that she was sexually assaulted when she was imprisoned in Israel. I am not surprised by that. I am not surprised that corporate media is not really covering that as well. So that was the story that apparently Briahna Joy Gray added to another post on Instagram. This is not about a community standards issue. This was about Meta, Instagram, Mark Zuckerberg making an executive decision not to get that story out. And for as long as you have heard them claim and say, well, Hamas did this on October 7th and they did this to these women, which they had no evidence of, anytime you point to examples of sexual violence from Israel, from the IDF, those stories are greatly suppressed. And in the case of Bree, her account was suspended. So I'll show you the suspension here. We suspended your account, Briahna Joy Gray, 180 days left to appeal, or will permanently disable your account. Her account, it says it was suspended on December 27th, 2025. What this means, your account is not visible to people on Instagram right now, and you cannot use it. So she has time for an appeal. But the point is, she shouldn't have to appeal it. Why is that a problem? If you can scroll on Instagram and you can see people with the boobies out and the booties out, but you can't see this story of this woman saying that she had sexual violence committed against her in Israel when she was imprisoned, that tells you the propaganda. That tells you the agenda. They just don't want people to know about it. So someone like Bree, who was Bernie Sanders' press secretary, has been around in the progressive movement for years. Prominent voice, Harvard Law School graduate. I mean, she was a lawyer. If they can go after her, they can go after anybody. Right? Especially considering when you look at the comments that she said were in her inbox on Instagram, you got to see this. These accounts are not suspended. Kitten of Judah, I can only hope a religion of peace follower blanks near you, leaving only a pair of scorched eyebrows. But that account is not suspended. Here's another one. Shut your freaking mouth. I don't know. They're, I guess, trying to say fucking or whatever. You ugly N-word. I wish someone pours acid on your effing ugly face. You effing terrorist supporter, ugly whore. But that account isn't suspended. So it's very clear that that type of behavior is okay as long as it's on the pro-Israel side. But her simply sharing the story of the Freedom Flotilla activist who was sexually assaulted is apparently against the rules. This isn't the first time that Briahna Joy Gray has been either suspended or fired. Let's go back to when she was fired from the Hill Rising. And this was a moment then that we were trying to tell people, hey, man, people are losing their jobs. There were also professors who lost their jobs because they supported, the pro-Palestinian cause or because they called it a genocide. One of the things they try to do is censor you, suppress you, silence you, sue you, or get you fired. Now, when Briahna Joy Gray was fired from the Hill Rising, remember, it was over this issue, the Israel issue. I want to take you back to when she went on Don Lemon's show. What was interesting about this, I think Don Lemon's position has changed a little bit since then. But at that time, it seemed like to me, he just couldn't really understand why the Hill Rising would do this. Now, the Hill Rising is corporate media. It's not independent. So people do have to remember that. It's owned by a company called Nexstar. So they're still corporate. But she went on a Don Lemon show to talk about her firing, why she was fired. And I just want to remind you guys about this.
You're arguing that it's free speech, right? But there are people who would say, especially if you believe in exactly what free speech means, and that is, the government can infringe or create no laws. They would say it's not actually a free speech issue because you can still speak in the town square. You can still speak out on Twitter. You're not being arrested for it. And the company doesn't have to pay you for your speech anymore. So I know you're not contesting your firing, but do you understand where I'm coming from with that? I do see your side.
Yeah, but I guess let's pause here for a second. What was interesting? At that time, Don Lemon said that people were not being jailed for it. And you know what went on to happen in the UK? They started arresting people for it. So this is why we have to call these things out, right? Like people getting fired because they're against genocide. That's not okay with me. And that obviously, of course, wasn't okay with Bree. But I'm calling this out to show you how far we've gone since then. It went from people getting fired to people losing platforms that they developed over the years to people in the UK, for example, getting arrested. This is what happens when we lose our freedoms, when we don't have these freedoms that we're supposed to have. And then when we have like this rise of fascism, this only is going to increase. It is very scary that that's happening in the UK. That is our neighbor across the pond. They're not that far from us when you think about it. And they're greatly aligned with the United States. So I look at what's happening in the UK as something that we really need to be concerned about. Let's get back into this here.
It's a streaming thing, but
I'm just a little confused because again, I'm not contesting the firing. They have every right to fire me. My pushback is that they don't have a right to fire me and then pretend that they still are invested in these principles. Mm-hmm. There's free speech as a constitutional protection, right?
In the spirit,
and then there's free speech as a principle that they purported to uphold as a news organization. Also, outside of this free speech discourse, most news organizations only have any credibility because they are like committed to at least the veneer of a kind of ideological objectivity, right? Democracy dies in darkness. All of these slogans tend to allude to the idea of being a straight shooter and calling balls and strikes, even if we obviously know that MSNBC and CNN have a liberal bias and Fox News has a conservative bias. They all are committed to this idea of the truth. How can you, as a news organization, represent yourself as being a credible conveyor of facts about the number one news story, not just in the country, but in the world, when you have quite literally fired one of your hosts, allegedly, well, who knows for what reason, but the reason that I think is because of her truthful, factual coverage of what's been going on in Israel, Palestine. And I will point out, there's a clip going somewhat viral right now of me and my co-host arguing, in which I point out that the accusation that Hamas had beheaded 40 babies was a lie. It was discredited by both Israeli and American fact finders and journalists. But when my co-host insisted that it was true on air repeatedly for weeks, and I pushed back and things got very heated, there was never any consequences. And I'm not arguing that there should have been, but there were no professional consequences for him getting the facts so egregiously wrong or for raising his voice and yelling, and even at one point using the F word at me and calling me a simpleton on air.
Because he was pro-Israel. Yeah, because Robbie was on the pro-Israel side. I remember those conversations. And, Rising hasn't been the same since they fired Briahna Joy Gray. That show has just gone downhill, continued to go downhill. I don't know how, it was like they lost all these subscribers after they fired Brie. Then all of a sudden they magically got more subscribers and got over 2 million subscribers. But if you look at their view count on their videos, it doesn't even add up. So there's something funny going on there. And I want to say this. When you look at what is happening with AI, artificial intelligence, how they are streamlining this. There's even AI channels on YouTube pretending to be a person sitting there at a desk reporting the news. And I was like, yeah, that ain't a real person. I mean, it's kind of easy to tell, especially for those of us that do this. This is all going to increase propaganda. If they can just pump out all these AI channels that pretend to be like news to get their message across, the pro-Israel message across, they're going to do that. They can flood the algorithm with those channels if they want to. Hell, we don't work at YouTube. We're basically contractors. All of us that have these shows, we're basically contractors. That's pretty much what we are. And then you have this aspect here with social media, Instagram, Facebook, suspending accounts because she shared a real news story, but it wasn't the news story that they wanted to hear. And another thing that I've pointed out, and I said this when Brie got fired, is that I notice it's almost like they tend to come down harder on Black voices that are pro-Palestine. Brie, look at how, they came after like Candace Owens. Like they just kind of feel like you better get in line. You better know your place. That's what it seems like to me. And Brie was committed to telling the truth. Rising didn't want to hear that. And apparently now Instagram also doesn't want to hear that. Instagram wants you to show pictures of your boobs, your butt, a dance, a product you're trying to sell. Maybe videos making fun of someone else. That's what they want. Same thing with Facebook. People ask, do you stream to Facebook? I don't stream to Facebook. Facebook is all over the damn place. They are one of the more heavily censored platforms. But they got all these damn ads. One of the reasons why I don't spend as much time on my personal Facebook as I used to is because I can't scroll past 2 posts without seeing an ad. Post, ad, post, ad, post, ad, post, ad. Can make a song out of that. So that tells you the game. They just want to sell advertising. And when you are telling too much truth, they're not going to be able to appeal to advertisers. So then they say, you got to go. Many of us that have covered the Israel stories will be the first to let you know a lot of those videos are demonetized because it doesn't appeal to advertisers. So with what happened with Brie, with Rising, now you see another censorship happening against her, this time on social media. And this is what I was warning people about. Now, hopefully she'll be able to reactivate her account. Like hopefully she will win that appeal, but there are no guarantees. And then even after you win the appeal, who's to say, that you feel comfortable posting on there anymore? This is what happens to a lot of accounts. So the censorship wave, and I've been calling for this for a long time, and I don't know how everybody else feels about it. There needs to be a platform that is created that is truly free speech, that is not clunky. And what I mean by that is some of these other platforms that are supposed to be an alternative to Twitter, Facebook, they're kind of clunky. You know, it's just the interface is not great. It's not user friendly. People they go there for a little bit. Look at what happened with Blue Sky. People are like, oh, we're leaving Twitter. They go all over to Blue Sky and then they get there and then they're like, there's no engagement over here. It doesn't act the way that Twitter was behaving. And that's the thing. So I still call for this. There needs to be, and you got to have money to do this. That's the thing. There needs to be a platform that can compete with Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, like all of it. And it needs to be independently owned, meaning that like you can't go public. Because once you go public, you got a board. But it needs to be independently owned, and it needs to be, well, I guess I would say it needs to be a worker co-op. That's what it needs to be. Owned by the people. And maybe people get points. Like, so for example, maybe since it's a worker co-op and your data is being used, maybe you get certain points by interacting with the website. I don't know. But the reason why we get into this situation, other than, of course, the silencing of the truth, is because these other platforms that are produced cannot compete. There's been many alternatives that have been created to YouTube, and none of them really compete. Some people say Rumble. Rumble doesn't even really compete either. It doesn't. Look at the numbers. Rockfin tried to be that. It doesn't really compete. Odyssey, same thing. It's just not there. So we do need that. We need that competition, that real competition, where people can have choices to go elsewhere. And if it's a worker co-op, you are part owner.
This was not about decorum. This was about ideology. And the viewers of The Hill are going to have to come to a decision about whether or not they can trust the news organization, given their obvious ideological bias.
A couple of things. So you're saying there's a double.
So, and the answer to that is no. Don Lemon, I think at that time, he was asking questions like, well, how do you know it's this reason and that kind of thing. I think he probably feels differently now. But at that time, he was just like, well, how do you know? And plus, it wasn't just Bree. Remember, Katie Halper got fired for the same issue from Rising. Now they can't even keep a co-host next to Robbie. They just rotate people in and out and trying to see what works. But that show has greatly fallen apart. So Briahna Joy Gray being suspended from Instagram, like I said, if they can suspend someone like her with the platform that she has, and she's a public figure, and with the numbers that she had, if they can suspend her, they can suspend any one of us. So go send Bree a kind message and tell her that, you're in solidarity with her, because it takes time to build up those types of platforms and some type of following, and to see it all just disappear overnight. Nobody wants that. But this is an attack on free speech. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.